Working control for field engineers. How to set layout points in construction. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the difference between working control and secondary and primary control and some of the things that you really need to look out for when you are designing it. So let me come right over here to my pad. I am killing sustainably sourced forests over here, but we are jamming because we've planted some new trees here. But I love sketching, and you know that. We know that primary control is a control network that is precise and accurate, that surrounds the project site, that is permanent, and that secondary control is building specific and it's semi-permanent, and that working control is where once you have grid lines and you need to lay out a wall line, you can lay out that wall line, and that's called working control. So let me just go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Like, let's say that this is your slab on grade. I'm just using general terms here and general examples. Let's say that my grid lines are right there, and I have this wall that I want to build, and the carpenters asked for a 3-foot offset line, and they want to make sure that there's an elevation temporary benchmark over here. That right there is working control. Now, grid lines are technically still secondary, but let me give you some guidelines here. When you are taking a foundation plan and a slab on grade plan, and you're going to transfer your baseline, which can technically be on grid line perfectly or at an offset. I'm going to do offsets. Let me just do this the wrong way, and then I'll show you the right way. Let's say that somebody was like, okay, I'll do an offset in this direction, and then I'll do an offset in this direction, and then I'll do an offset in this direction, and then an offset in this direction, and then offset in this direction. We're going to confuse somebody, and we're going to get something way wrong. You want to keep your offsets the same across the board. So if the offset was on this side, it needs to be on this side, and then when you hit the end, you can bring it on the inside if you want, and you can have one of these at the other side offset on the inside if you want, but for the most part, these are on the same side of the grid line at a consistent offset. We wouldn't do like a 3-foot offset, 4-foot offset, 5-foot offset back to 3. We want them for the most part on the same side of the grid line, and if they're a 3-foot offset, we're going to do 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and 3. So that's crucial. But another thing is, don't just come in here and design your offsets or your grid lines on your slab on grade willy-nilly, because let's say that you have throughout the building a massive mechanical duct run that is running in this direction, and you have some massive building components in your way, and you have designed your grid lines to where when you bring them up the building, you can't plumb up through sleeves in the actual concrete decks, and now you can't really bring your horizontal control up vertically properly throughout the building. Let me just draw the actual rules here. Number one, you will want to have consistency in the direction of the offsets. You will want to have consistent offset dimensions, okay? And number 3, you will want to consider building components. And when I say building components, what I mean is mechanical, electrical, plumbing that could be in your way, finished floors, like maybe you have exposed concrete floors, permanent structures. Is there going to be like gang boxes staged in your way? You want to design your grid system to where it's as out of the way as possible and consistent. Now, I'll talk about this in the next video, so don't get me talking too much. Kick me on the shin if I go too far. But if you have a high-rise, you want that secondary control grid on the ground floor to be where you at least have 2 points, and you can plumb up through sleeves on each floor, and that is the best way. Just want you to know there's some debate about that. You can plumb up from the ground floor all the way up and control the plumb of that building. So these have to be done properly. Now let's talk about working control specifically. Let's say you have your grid lines and you want to go build a wall over here. The first thing that you'll want to do is talk to the carpenters or the folks doing the work, and you ask them what offset they want. Hopefully it's the same as the other so we don't make mistakes. And they'll say, okay, I want a 3-foot offset on this side, or maybe because they're going to use tattletales, meaning they're going to plumb from the top of the formwork, maybe they want a 6-inch or a 1-foot, or whatever it is. Ask them what offset that they want. When you do that, there's a couple things that you can do here. Number one, if you're setting this line, okay, and it's at the right offset, you can measure from this line by holding here at this point and pulling a radius, and holding at this point and pulling a radius. And then what you'll do is you'll snap past the farthest points to get a perfectly parallel line there. These are just a couple of the rules. The other thing is sometimes we have to mark a perpendicular line, and you can use the 3, 4, 5. Can you believe I was taught 6, 8, 10? I don't know why that happened, but the base is 3, 4, 5. So you can actually come down here and measure a multiple of 3, 4, 5 and measure 3, make a mark, measure 4 out here and do an arc, and then measure 5 and do an intersecting arc, and that means you can create a perpendicular line. So you're going to use this two taping technique to go from your grid lines over to your working control. But the bottom line is, if I'm going to build this wall, I will want offsets that I can give to the craft, and they might want a temporary benchmark over here. And I'm sorry, but if you are going to do a temporary benchmark, and let's say that on both sides of this building you have 2 benchmarks. By the way, if this is a building like I was showing you here or here, you want 2 benchmarks around that building. Some people will say 1, because if it's wrong, at least it's all consistent. I don't want it to be wrong. I want to be able to check into 2 benchmarks. There's always 2 benchmarks per building. So if I'm going to set a temporary benchmark over here, I will set up my automatic level, backsite, foresight. Then I will backsite, foresight, backsite, foresight, close, and be able to get the new value for the elevation here. Anyway, so you are going to follow that commandment of every benchmark that you set having gone through 2 other benchmarks, using 3-wire leveling, estimating to the nearest thousandth, and like I already said, closing back and adjusting the points if necessary. If you have working control for this wall, you'll have your offset lines and you will have your benchmark. Working control, and it's temporary. So one of the things I like to do is, if I'm doing these lines, I might spray down clear coat on the slab before I snap the line, let it dry, then snap the line, then clear it again, so that one of these days when we're polishing that floor, those marks will just come up and I won't stain it if it's exposed concrete. But the bottom line is, these should be temporary marks specific to the component. So it could be for embeds, it could be for wall height, it could be a 4-foot offset line on the form, but working control needs to be a communication between you and the craft. Your grid lines need to enable it, and how you're going to take the rest of the building up through the structure. This will become a blog post and become a future chapter, and if you need help, reach out to us. And this is also mentioned in Wes Crawford's book, Construction Surveying and Layout. I hope you've loved this video. On we go.